everyone, I'm Rica Villasina from Optech 122. Welcome to my channel. Yesterday, we tackled about morality and ethics. And today, as per Ms. Agarao who asked in the comment box, we are going to discuss about applied ethics. How do we take moral knowledge and put it into practice? What is applied ethics?
According to Childress J. 1986 in the study of Tom J. 2014, it is the application of ethics to special arenas of human activity such as business, politics, and medicines and to particular problems such as abortion. Furthermore, Coles T. 2012 stated that applied ethics is the art or science of reflecting on moral dilemmas and moral problems in different social contexts. Also, applied ethics is one of the three divisions of the philosophy of ethics. The other two are the normative ethics and meta-ethics. CompellingTruth.org stated that applied ethics takes these two other divisions and uses them to definitely state the morality of specific actions. In that manner, we now know that applied ethics is the application of an ethical theory in a certain situation, problem, or dilemma, which always ended with a question of, is it moral or not?
Next is fields of applied ethics according to CompellingTruth.org.
Business ethics balance the unwritten responsibilities a business has to its employees and communities with the purpose of business, which is to make money. Professional ethics. It is similar to business ethics but applies to individual profession more than to the corporation as a whole. It is you as a professional. Sample of this are the attorney-client privilege and doctor-patient confidentiality. Bioethics or biomedical or clinical ethics. It is a broad, issue-rich field of ethics that talks about life and health of a human. Social ethics. It is the responsibilities nations and citizens have toward themselves, each other, and the world as a whole. Environmental ethics. It is the responsibility mankind has for animals, ecosystems, waterways, and air quality. One of the moral issues that we're going to discuss is about abortion and euthanasia, which is also tackled in the book of Beckwith 2002 in his book Do the Right Thing, Readings in Applied Ethics and Social Philosophy, the second edition. So what is abortion? Abortion is a procedure to end a pregnancy. It either uses medicine or surgical to remove the embryo or fetus and placenta from the uterus of a woman. Abortion is probably one of the most controversial and most often discussed moral issue, and most of debate misunderstood this issue, arguing that the right to abortion is as constitutionally fundamental as the freedom of religion and speech. According to the morality of abortion in this book, philosophers and ethicists have argued for and against abortion rights in primarily two ways. One, from the moral status of the fetus, and two, from the bodily rights of the pregnant woman. Arguments from the moral status of the fetus. Scientifically, there is no doubt that the beginning of individual human life begins at conception and does not end until natural death. At the moment of conception, when sperm and ovum cease to exist as individual entities, a new being with its own genetic code comes into existence. No new genetic information is added to the individual from this moment until natural death. All that is needed for its development is food, water, air, and an environmental conducive to its survival. These facts are not denied by those who believe that abortion is morally justified at some point during pregnancy. What they argue is that the unborn entity though a human being from conception is not a person until some decisive moment after conception. Some argues that personhood does not arrive until brain waves were detected 40 to 43 days or some other decisive moments, either during or after pregnancy. Others, such as Warren in chapter 12, define a person as a being who can do certain things, such as have consciousness, solve complex problems, and communicate, which would put the arrival of a personhood quite possibly after birth. Traditional pro-lifers, such as Schwartz in chapter 13, respond by maintaining that there are good reasons to continue to accept and no good reason to deny that human personhood begins at conception. While on B, arguments from bodily rights of the pregnant woman, some abortion rights supporters, such as Judith Jarvis Thompson in chapter 14, disagree that the abortion debate hinges on the moral status of the fetus. They argue that even in the unborn is a human person from conception or sometime early on in pregnancy, abortion is still morally justified. Thompson argues that the fetus' physical dependence on the pregnancy woman's body entails a conflict of right if the pregnant woman did not consent to the pregnancy. Consequently, the fetus, regardless of whether it is fully human person, cannot use another body's without her consent. Thus, a pregnant woman's removal of the fetus by abortion, though it will result in its death, is no more immoral than adult person's refusal to donate her kidney, though this refusal may result in the death of a person who needs the kidney. In response to Thompson's arguments is an essay by Francis J. Beckwith in chapter 15. What is euthanasia? The word euthanasia comes from two Greek words, eu and thanatos, which translated literally means good death or happy death. Today, euthanasia is defined as an act that brings about the death of a terminally ill who is either suffering tremendously and or is near death. Death is brought about either by actively causing the patient's death, such as by giving a little injection or removing oxygen from the patient's room, or by passively causing the patient's death, such as by withdrawing or withholding treatment which is perceived as useless. The former is known as active euthanasia, while the latter is known as passive euthanasia. In passive euthanasia, the intent is not to kill but simply to relieve the patient of an unnecessary burden and to permit nature to take its course. James Rachels, professor of philosophy at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, is the author of numerous scholarly articles in ethics and moral philosophy. Among his published books are The End of Life, Euthanasia and Morality in 1986 and The Right Thing to Do, Basic Readings in Moral Philosophy in 1989. Professor Rachels maintained that active euthanasia is morally justified in some circumstances. First, he argues that a patient who has mere biological life and has lost his biographical life has a right to commit suicide. Professor Rachels believes that what makes life worth living is not mere biological life, but one's biographical life, one's hopes, life experiences, dreams, pursuits, interests, and etc. Thus, if one's biographical life has ended, we have no right to prevent a person from ending his or her biological life. Professor Rachels also argues that there is no essential moral difference between active or killing and passive letting die euthanasia. But then he concluded if passive euthanasia is morally accepted and there is no moral difference between passive and active euthanasia, then active euthanasia must also be morally accepted. He defends this position by employing some fictional story of Jones and Smith, in which both of them seem to be guilty of committing morally equivalent acts, though Jones merely let the boy die, whereas Smith killed the boy. Vincent Ryan Ruggiero, a professor emeritus in State University of New York, Delhi, in his book Thinking Critically About Ethical Issues, 7th edition, had given us preliminary guidelines for us to be guided as we have our ethical judgment. So, we have first, be aware of your impression, note them carefully. Knowing the way your thinking inclines is the first step towards balancing it if it needs balancing. Number 2, check to be sure you have all the relevant facts. If you do not have them, get them. An encyclopedia is usually a good place to start. Almanacs also provided a wealth of information, and there are a lot of books that you can use. Number 3, consider the various opinions on the issue and the arguments that have been or could be used to support them. The position that directly opposes your first impression is often the most helpful one to consider. If your impression is wrong, this step will help you find out. If it is not, then you can return to it with confidence and present it more effectively for having considered alternatives to it. Do not make the mistake common today of ignoring what religious thinkers have to say about moral issues. As long as they are presenting the reasoning of their ethical tradition, as opposed to simply stating their theological doctrines, their contribution to moral discussion are entirely relevant and should be welcome. If you refuse to consider those contributions, you will be denying yourself the insight that historically enriched the subject of ethics and helped form the foundation of our system of laws. Number 4, keep your thinking flexible. Do not feel obligated to your early ideas. The process of ethical thinking entails entertaining many ideas, some of which you will accept, some of which you will discard as inferior. No judgment is your official judgment until you endorse it publicly in speaking or writing, and even then, you may choose to revise it. So change your mind as often as you would like as you analyze an issue. The more fully and unprejudicially you explore the issue, the better your judgment is likely to be. Number 5, express your judgment precisely and explain the reasoning that underlies it. It is all easy to say something you don't quite mean, especially when the issue is both complex and controversial. The best way to avoid this problem is to experiment with several different ways of expressing your judgment instead of accepting the first version you produce. If your judgment is not a simple yes or no, but a form of it depends, be sure to specify what it depends on and exactly how your judgment would vary in different circumstances. Finally, no statement of your judgment is sufficient by itself. Be sure to explain in as much detail as necessary for understanding what line of reasoning led you to that conclusion rather than to some other none.
Our morality will always be tested by different means. That's why we should know where we stand. In every issue we're going to encounter, we should know what ethical principle we should apply and should be able to stand still. In whatever position we agreed on, we are the ones who decide whether an action is morally right or morally wrong. So be wise in every decision, for it will dictate our future action and will lead us to our future self. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. Goodbye!